Hello and welcome to MarketSquare, your go-to show for deep insights into business and economic trends. I'm Olaiton Adebayo, and today we are diving into key developments across Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back to MarketSquare. The trade dispute between the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria and the Dangote Petroleum Refinery has put Nigerians' ambition of becoming Africa's refinery up to its toughest test. Gas providers confirmed that facilities feeding the Escrovos Lagos pipeline system have been shut down, disrupting supply distribution network. Customers have been notified that deliveries will remain suspended until the crisis is resolved. Stakeholders fear that prolonged disruption will worsen foreign exchange pressures, especially as the Oil Workers Union directs its members nationwide to withdraw their services following the alleged dismissal of more than 800 Nigerian workers by the refinery. Organized labor has demanded the reinstatement of the sacked workers, accusing the refinery of displacing qualified Nigerians and replacing them with the foreign labor, a move they describe as a multi-dimensional threat to the nation's economy and workforce. This crisis between the union and Dangote refinery is more than just an industrial dispute. It's a direct threat to Nigerians' economic stability, energy security, and household livelihoods. At the economic level, the shutdown of the Dangote refinery and fertilizer plant is estimated to cost Nigeria about $110.8 million in daily crude oil export revenue, alongside 14.7 billion naira daily losses from refinery shutdown. Beyond the numbers, this disruption has knock-off effects on foreign exchange supply, already a fragile point for Nigeria's economy. With oil proceeds accounting for more than 80% of the FX inflows, the loss of export revenue will deepen dollar shortage, weaken naira stability, and fuel inflationary pressures. Investors, both domestic and foreign, are likely to read this as a signal of instability, deterring much needed inflows at a time Nigeria is struggling to meet its 2025 budget targets. For ordinary Nigerians, the consequences are immediate and harsh. Dangote Refinery reportedly supply about 17 million liters of fuel daily, roughly a third of domestic demand. Cutting off this supply risks sparking a 32% fuel shortage, with ripple effects on transport, food prices, logistics, and electricity costs, since diesel and gas are crucial for powering businesses and homes. Inflation, which is already straining household incomes, will spike further as food and transport account for the bulk of consumer spending. For businesses, especially SMEs, rising fuel and energy costs would erode margins, force layoffs, and push some into closure. The labor hunger has another dimension. If it is confirmed that the over 800 Nigerian workers were dismissed for joining a union and replaced with foreign workers, it is raising questions of labor rights violation in favor of expatriates. This not only undermines Nigerian professional workforce, but also risks sparking wider industrial unrest, as CUC and NUPENG have already threatening to escalate action nationally. Such instability could paralyze the entire oil and gas value chain, further weakening economic activity. On the flip side, Dangote argues that union actions amount to economic sabotage, warning of severe national hardship if crude and gas supplies are blocked. This highlights a governance gap. The over-reliance on a single mega refinery for national fuel security without strong safeguards leaves Nigeria vulnerable to supply shocks. Globally, countries with strong refining capacity mitigate such risks through diversified supply chains, regional depots, and pipelines. Nigeria's lack of such infrastructure makes it highly exposed to strikes, disputes, or operation hitches. This standoff is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it exposes corporate labor practices and need for fair worker treatment. On the other hand, it shows the risks of allowing labor disputes to spill into national economic sabotage. If unresolved, it could worsen fuel scarcity, weaken the naira, and trigger inflation spikes and damage investor sentiment. The way forward lies in urgent mediation by government, NNPC, labor unions, and refining management to restore supply, reinstate lawful labor practices, and enforce clear rules that balance workers' rights with national economic security. Without this, both the economy and the people stand to bear the cost of prolonged uncertainty. In a related development within the oil and gas industry, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited has signed a fresh 2-year crude supply agreement with the Dangote Petroleum Refinery, a move designed to secure feedstock for the 650,000 barrel per day plant in Lekki and safeguard domestic fuel supply. The deal finalized in August underscores the federal government's determination to prioritize crude deliveries to Africa's largest privately owned refinery, particularly in Naira, under the Crude for Naira initiative. The mechanism is aimed at strengthening energy security, reducing pressure on foreign exchange, and stabilizing fuel availability in domestic markets. Between October 2024 and September 2025, Dangote Refinery has been allocated about 82 million barrels of crude. Of these, 49.3 million barrels, representing 60%, were supplied in Naira. This reflects the government's strategic effort to cushion the downstream sector from forex volatility while supporting local refining capacity. The agreement comes against the backdrop of recent tensions when Dangote Refinery suspended Naira-based petrol sales after exhausting its allocation. That temporary halt raised fears of fresh disruptions in domestic fuel supply, but was quickly resolved following intervention by the Naira for Crude Technical Committee. Confirming development, NNPC's Chief Corporate Communication Officer, Andy Ode, said the new sales and purchase agreement will run until 2027. He explained that NNPC Dangote Refinery and the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority regularly reconcile the volume and value of crude delivered in Naira to ensure transparency. According to Ode, 3 Naira-denominated cargoes were allocated in August, with 5 cargoes each for September and October. Loading operations for August have been completed, while September allocations are underway, with 2 vessels currently in preloading stages. The deal not only guarantees operational stability for the refinery, but also reassures domestic market of steady petrol, diesel, and aviation fuel supply. With 60% of its crude now supplied in Naira, the arrangement eases forex demand pressures, a critical relief for an economy grappling with currency volatility. The new NNPC Dangote agreement running until 2027 is more than a supply contract. It represents a policy anchor, one that ties Nigeria's largest private refinery into the national energy security framework, while also cushioning households and businesses from the shocks of global oil price swings. Shifting focus to the broader economy, the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise has called on the federal government to strengthen social protection programs as Nigerians grapple with the painful impact of ongoing economic reforms. While the economy is beginning to show signs of stability, the union says vulnerable Nigerians risk being left behind without targeted interventions. In a policy commentary marking the Nigerian 5th independence anniversary, CPPE Chief Executive Officer Dr. Muda Yusuf acknowledged that reforms such as exchange rate unification, fuel subsidy removal, and tax policy adjustments were bold steps that had long been avoided. But he warned that these measures, though necessary, have imposed short-term pain through high inflation and a sharp drop in household purchasing power. According to Yusuf, sustaining the reform momentum requires pairing economic adjustment with deliberate social protection. He recommended policies such as targeted cash transfers, food security intervention, and job creation initiative to shield vulnerable households and preserve public support for reforms. Looking back at Nigerian economic history, Yusuf described the nation's 65 years as a story of resilience, but also one marked by missed opportunities and untapped potential. He argued that the current reform agenda offers a rare opportunity to reset economic on a path of stability, competitiveness, and shared prosperity. He also stressed that this would require policy consistency, stronger institutions, and a deliberate focus on ensuring that growth translates into improved living standards. The commentary also highlighted deep-rooted structural challenges. Yusuf noted that the Naira's steep depreciation from being stronger than the US dollar in the 1970s to about 1,600 Naira to the dollar in 2024 has eroded purchasing power, raised production costs, and discouraged investments. Rising public debt and unsustainable debt service to revenue ratio, he added, continue to limit government's ability to fund critical infrastructure. To overcome these constraints, CPP outlined key policy priorities, restoring currency stability through credible monetary policy, boosting non-oil export to expand foreign exchange supply, improving efficiency in public spending, plunging fiscal leakages, and raising non-oil revenue without stifling private enterprise. Despite these challenges, Yusuf pointed to the encouraging signs, noting that the economy has begun to experience a degree of stability over the past years, an indication reform may be laying the groundwork for recovery. Nigerians start at a crossroad. With the right mix of reforms and social protection, the country has a chance to turn painful adjustments into lasting stability. Without them, however, the risk of deepening poverty and eroded public confidence remains high. Away from oil, Nigeria's economic reforms are drawing sharp international scrutiny. The United States Department of State 2025 Nigeria Investment Climate Statement offers a sobering view of Nigeria's economy. It highlights bold reform efforts on one hand and on the other hand exposes the weakness in governance and execution that continue to undermine their impact. At the center of the report is Nigeria's duty-free food import policy introduced in July 2024 as a short-term intervention to ease food inflation. The plan was to waive tariffs on staples like rice, maize, wheat, and beans for 150 days, flooding the market with cheaper supplies. On paper, the initiative appeared ambitious and promising. In practice, it faltered almost immediately. Bureaucratic delays, weak transparency, and poor implementation meant the policy was never fully realized. As a result, food prices continued to climb, reinforcing a troubling trend in Nigeria. As a result, food prices continue to climb, reinforcing a troubling trend in Nigeria where well-intentionalized policy often collapse under the weight of poor execution. The food duty waiver is not our only isolated failure. Similar patterns played out in other sectors, from cooking gas to pharmaceuticals. Despite waivers on import duties and VAT for gas cylinders, refuels, and essential medicines, household saw no significant relief. Gas prices kept rising and drug costs remained stubbornly high. These outcomes point to structural challenges, policy bottlenecks, inefficiency at the port, and entrenched corruption erode reforms before they reach ordinary citizens. Beyond this short-term intervention, the report situates Nigeria's broader economy within a difficult context. President Tinubu's reform, including foreign exchange and the removal of fuel subsidies, have brought some stability. The naira has steadied around 1,500 naira to the dollar. External results are at a three-year high, and Nigeria successfully issued its first euro bond since 2022. But these gains have come with short-term pain. Inflation remains elevated, food security has worsened, and poverty has deepened dramatically, rising from 49% of the population in 2023 to 56% in 2024. That means 20 million additional Nigerians sleep below the poverty line in just 1 year. The report further identified deep structural weakness in Nigeria's investment climate. The power sector remains underdeveloped, with unreliable grid supply, forcing business to rely on costly diesel generator, which in turn drive up inflation. Regulatory uncertainty, custom inefficiency, and corruption continue to frustrate both domestic and foreign investors. Security concerns from kidnapping and terrorism to pipeline vandalism also weigh heavily on investor confidence. For ordinary Nigerians, the consequences are severe. Government announcements of waivers and duty suspension rarely translate into lower household costs. Families remain squeezed by rising food and energy prices, while access to affordable healthcare remains elusive. For businesses community, the pattern is just as discouraging. If policy meant to ease crisis consistently fail in delivery, investors see Nigeria as a high-risk environment where even good policy cannot be trusted to work. The US report highlights a persistent gap between policy promises and practical outcomes in Nigeria. Duty-free imports, LPG waivers, and drug exemptions all suffer the same fate. Weak execution that left citizens paying higher prices and businesses struggling. While Nigeria has enormous potential, the combination of policy inconsistency, corruption, and insecurity continues to paint it as a difficult terrain. Unless governance and institutional bottlenecks are fixed, Nigerian reforms will remain symbolic, producing limited real impact. The result is a country where citizens grow poorer and investors grow frustrated, despite the promise of reform. From labor dispute to new oil deals, policy reforms, and global scrutiny of Nigeria's economy, these are the stories shaping the nation's economy today. This is Market Square. Molai Adebayo. See you on the next one.